And the first one that I want to talk about is how to prevent dog bites, which people might think, oh, this is like a weird topic for a plastic surgery show. But if people are really injured badly by dog bites, a lot of times plastic surgeons are who gets called. And so I've been treating dog bite victims for 15 years now. And so it's something I know a lot about, and something that at least at one point during my career I did a bunch of research into just to see if there was anything to learn about how to prevent dog bites, or there's certain breeds that are need to be more wary of.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's some good information to be learned to potentially prevent either yourself or a family member having a dog bite attack. So it happens a lot more than you might think. They say that there's 4 to 5 million dog bite injuries in the United States every year.
Yeah.
Which, that's pretty crazy. That's a huge number. Now, the good news is there's a lot of dog bites are really insignificant. And of those 4.5 million, there's only 800,000 that actually go to a hospital or an ER to be seen. So I guess, what is that? 1 out of every 5 or 6 is significant enough. That
regrettably, my dog bites.
Your dog bites? What kind of dog is it?
Anatolian Shepherd. He's from Afghanistan.
Oh, really?
We rescued him.
I'm about to see a picture of this dog.
Yeah, he's kind of a turd to other people.
Oh, is he? Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that. It's interesting that you have that experience. So of those 800,000 that have to seek medical attention in the ER, half of them are kids. And that's why it's something that, it's not that injuries to adults are not important, but obviously injuries to kids who are not as able to prevent those injuries to themselves, it's important. And of those 800,000 that go to the ER, about 13,000 actually have to come into the hospital for serious treatment. And on average, there's 15 to 20 deaths every year from dog bites, which is a fairly significant amount. It's about 1 or 2.
Was it like from infection or just from the actual?
No, just from the traumatic
puncture.
Yeah, usually people bleed out. It can be severe. A dog. I'm thinking about like wolves in the wild. They kill things by tearing them apart. So, all right. So, how to prevent dog bites? Well, there's a couple ways to look at this, and the first way I want to look at it is, how do you prevent children from, becoming a victim of dog bite? And so I think that it is important to teach your kids to respect all animals, but especially dogs, because they are so prevalent, and there's a lot of feeling, every dog is going to be cuddly and wants to me to pet him and snuggle with him, and that's not always the case. So, teach your kids to respect a dog, and that means never running at a dog.
Yep.
Teasing the dog, running up and trying to pet a dog that someone has on a leash.
Just any aggressive movement, really. Aggressive sounds and movement.
Yeah, when you look into the science of why dogs bite, it's usually reactionary. Dogs are not trying to eat you because they're hungry. The bite is a reaction to either fear or some sort of territorial defense, usually, or they feel like you're threatening them or their owner. And so you're exactly right that making really fast movements towards dogs is definitely going to increase it, because if you startle it, it might latch out.
And little kids have not much control
of
themselves.
Exactly, and that's why it all comes down to educating your kids. And I guess maybe this is because I actually treat a lot of dog bite victims, and in the past treated a ton of kids.
Do they get bit in the face a lot because they're more at their face?
And that's one of the things we'll talk about is you really never should put your face up to a dog's face. And they say you shouldn't even do it to your own dog. Now, I have to admit that I do that to my dogs.
Oh, me too.
But I'm very serious about training my dog. I have big dogs. I have Dobermans. They're potentially dangerous animals.
They're
and so
seen as a scary dogs too.
Yeah, they're
sometimes
considered scary.
Yeah.
The other thing too is anytime that you have a dog and a child together, they should never be left unsupervised.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not sure that always happens if it's the family dog and a child, because eventually you think the dog becomes accustomed, but it's really not.
I started leaving Avery alone around my dogs maybe not until she was in maybe kindergarten, I think, with first grade, honestly.
That's smart. By the time the dog is accustomed, but so we have these big dogs, and my niece lives here in town, and she has little kids, and they bring them over all the time, and I'm just hyper vigilant when the little kids and my dogs are. Not that my dogs are aggressive, because they're not.
Because kids will just randomly start running around and making loud noises.
And the dogs weigh over 100 pounds. They can that. My dogs ran me down in the yard one time on accident, literally knocked me down. So what they would do to a 30-pound kid? Send him over the fence.
Yeah.
So, supervising children and dogs together is always a really, really good idea. And so the other thing is like, what should you do as a dog owner, right? Because you want your dogs to not be a dog that has some sort of event where it bites someone. Probably the best thing to do is start socializing them when they're a puppy. And we'll talk about like some of the things that are risk factors for serious dog bites, but socializing dogs is good. If they're not used to being around people, they are more likely to lash out when they get startled.
Yeah.
It's always good that when you have a dog, and just like I said, be around your dog when they're with unfamiliar people. Like if I have people that are at my house doing something, I let my dogs out, I'm always like literally right next to them. I'm not gonna let my dogs run by a stranger, especially on our own property, without me being out there. And then if you feel like your dog is anxious or agitated, and I think you can tell. I mean, you can tell when dogs like get upset.
I feel like if you're anxious, your dog's probably anxious.
Probably true. But you can definitely tell when the dogs are like on alert. And if they get like that, the best thing to do is just take them out of the situation.
Yeah.
Pull them back. It's best for them. It's best for you. It's best for the person that potentially might receive an injury.
I have a little room in my house, like my utility room / mudroom. That's where they go if I have people over at my house. Because I just don't have to mess with it.
I personally like to have my dogs out when people are there, and even when we have parties and stuff, like I usually will put them in their kennels initially, and then as the party starts to wind down, I'll let them out because it's good for socializing. Like there's a lot of people there, people want to pet the dogs, and I think it helps them become more accustomed to people and less likely to kind of act out. So the other thing as far as, what should you do if you find yourself in a situation where there's an aggressive dog that maybe is without their owner, and you kind of were talking about it earlier. You definitely don't want to make quick movements. I mean, at the end of the day, dogs are pack animals, and they have an instinct to potentially be aggressive in a hunting or territorial way. And if you run from a dog, their tendency is to chase you. So running from a dog is always a bad idea because you're not going to outrun them. So what they say to do is, one, you should be quiet. Loud noises also can startle a predatory instinct in dogs. So be quiet, but stand strong and firm.
Big.
Yeah, big. Like make yourself look imposing. But they say that also you don't want to hold eye contact directly with a dog for long periods of time. They see that as a potential threat.
Yeah.
So although you want to make sure that you have your vision on where the dog is, you don't want to stare them in the eye because that can initiate them to potentially to attack or bite.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of research in past and actually when I was prepping for this. And so there are some risk factors associated with fatal dog injuries. We kind of talked about the things that you can do to prevent just a dog bite, but what are some of the scenarios or things that happened in these incidences when a dog killed someone? And so there are a few things, and one of the major things was an absence of an able-bodied person to intervene. And what that means is that somebody, whether it be an older person, maybe a small female or a child, was around a dog that was aggressive.
Completely alone.
And there was nobody else there to help. That's one of the factors that was found in dog bite fatalities. Also, the victim unfamiliar with the dog. I mean, there are plenty of instances where a dog that is known to someone has caused a fatal injury, but that's not the normal.
Yeah.
It's something like 80 to 85% of dog bite victims are attacked by a dog they didn't know. The dog's not being neutered. Dogs that are not neutered are much more likely to be involved in serious attacks. And so, I guess that's something where owners kind of need to be aware of that. The proper thing to do is to get your dog neutered unless you're breeding them specifically for whatever reason. Compromised ability of the victim to interact. So once again, it goes back to maybe like elderly people or children. That's more prone. And then the last two things are related to the dogs themselves. If dogs are isolated and they're not socially integrated into being around people, or if the dogs have a history of abuse or neglect.
Yeah.
And so I think those are all good things. Just kind of file away in your memory. Okay, these are things that potentially could lead to a bad situation with a dog. And if I find myself in that situation or see someone in a situation like that, perhaps I should kind of step in and do something. And then lastly, this is kind of like where the controversial part comes up when it comes to dog, and it comes about breed. I tend to see the worst of the worst dog injuries because if someone gets bit by a dog and they don't go to the hospital, well, I'm not going to see them. If somebody gets bit by a dog and they go to the hospital and it's really minor, I'm not going to see them.
Yeah.
So when I see dog bites, they usually are the worst.
It's like mutilated.
Yeah, like really, really severe injuries. And so I found over my career, especially, when I was working in the really big cities, like the level 1 trauma centers, a lot of pit bull attacks. And so, this is where
those are the ones that are always abused more.
That is true. They have a higher tendency to be abused. That's definitely true. When you look at the data on breeds, there's not one type of dog really that stands out as far as bites. Like pit bulls don't necessarily bite more than Labrador retrievers. And in fact, if you look at like breed, the one breed that always pops up is the most likely to bite is a Chihuahua. But I mean, if a Chihuahua bites you, it's like, so what? I mean, it doesn't. It's like, okay, yeah, that didn't really bother me.
But the problem with pit bulls, those little baby dogs sometimes can bite. A lot.
Of course. Like
I got bit by a Chihuahua when I was a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, Chihuahuas can bite, but the thing is when a Chihuahua bites, it's not like a medical event.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, where pit bulls have gotten a bad rap is because when they bite, they can do serious damage.
Yeah, because their heads are
And so I reviewed all the literature on
strong.
dog bites, both in the past and recently, and when you look at the data on fatality injuries, pit bulls lead by a huge margin. Like in the early 2000s, it was something like 30%. More recent studies have said something like 60% of dog bite fatalities are caused by pit bulls. And also, they far and away lead bites that result in either surgery or reconstruction. And so, that's not to say that there aren't pit bulls out there that are great animals, but my reason for mentioning that is you do have to have that extra bit of caution with a dog like that. It's the same thing with my Dobermans. I mean, Dobermans really have a pretty good reputation as a breed, but they're big, powerful animals. If they go after somebody, they can do massive damage.
Well, I mean, like any type of dog that's was bred for protection.
Yeah.
They're potentially dangerous.
Yeah,
like
German Shepherds,
My
Doberman
dog's
Pinschers,
a shepherd.
Rottweilers, pit bulls. If you want to own those animals,
You have to
I think
be
that's fine.
responsible.
I'm not in that group of people that says dogs should be banned because of breed, but you have to pay special attention to an animal that literally can kill someone.
Yeah.
And so, I personally won't let my children go to a house that has a pit bull. I don't trust that the owner, has done all the right things. And I mean, I'm very cautious about dogs anyway, just because my experience of treating like dozens or maybe even to hundreds of dog bites.
I never even thought about that, but Avery doesn't go over to people's houses yet, so that's a good thought though.
Good to think about. Anyway, dog bites, serious stuff. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you about your thoughts on dog bites.